In this video, we'll be discussing the Cat 7.1 diesel engine, how it works, the designs of it, and some of the interesting engineering decisions. Hey guys, this is Josh with Update Channel. In this video, we're going to be discussing the Cat 7.1 diesel engine. Now, why didn't I call it the C7? Well, there is a C7, that's a Cat-made diesel engine also. But just like saying the Ford 427 and the Chevy 427 are the same, that would be the same as saying these are the same. The blocks are completely different. They're completely different engine families. None of the parts are interchangeable, except for the paint. Well, the Cat 7.1 is a Perkins engine that Caterpillar builds for their machines. And it goes on a variety of machines and industrial applications. And it's based on the Perkins 6.6. Now, the 6.6 was built for a long time, decades. And also the Perkins 4.4, which is basically a 4-cylinder version of the 6.6, which the 6.6 is a 6-cylinder version. The 7.1 is also a 6-cylinder version, and it basically took place of the 6.6. Now, I've disassembled and assembled the 6.6s and 7.1, so we're going to discuss kind of what they modified from the 6.6 and some specifications with the 7.1, some good things about it, and then kind of a long list of engineering choices that kind of irritate me with the 7.1. So let's get into it. So here's a Cat 7.1. Obviously, the cylinder head has been removed. Got a few things. That's your ECM bracket. Oil filter on the intake side on the 7.1. High pressure fuel pump. These are common rail engines, by the way. Your water pump is fairly accessible right there. Gear driven. Damper. Alternator, whatever. All engines have that. The exhaust side is fairly simple. Not much going on there. Oil pan. And then there's a aluminum spacer that I call an oil pan spacer. I'll be discussing that later in the video. It is an interesting engine, that is for sure. Here's the cylinder head. You can see this head is not painted, so it's been replaced. We have our rail. This is a common rail engine, as I mentioned. Some of the sensors. The injectors. They sit more towards the rail side instead of more centered in the head. No quill tubes on a common rail engine. The fuel lines directly thread into the injectors. Kind of neat. These also have glow plugs, not something you see on too many diesel engines anymore, at least not the Cats and Cummins, but 2 intake, 2 exhaust valves per cylinder. Now here's some of the internal components. We have a rocker arm shaft here. It's a single rocker arm shaft, intake and exhaust valves, different lengths. There's no adjustment because it uses hydraulic lifters, so that's why you do not see an adjuster nut on those. We'll be discussing the springs and the plastic retainers later. And a nice little tirade I have against them. It's a pushrod engine. As I already mentioned, has hydraulic lifters. We're going to be walking over to a machine that has the 7.1. Cat uses these engines in a lot of applications. This is a 950M wheel loader. Here's what the injector is removed. You can see the fitting I was talking about where the fuel lines directly connect to. And this is the 950 that has the 7.1 in it. This one I'm doing set of injectors, as I just mentioned. Fuel lines not reusable, as well as the injector hold-down bolts. That's pretty universal in all Cat engines. Uses a compound turbo system similar to C13, C15 Assert engines. DPF and SCR is fairly well established on this machine that it's over the valve cover. Not too bad. Now here is the block turned upside down. You can see the uppers on the main bearings, because remember it's upside down here. Piston cooling jets. This does have piston cooling jets. They've been removed. You can see your thrust bearings there. And kind of a little different thrust bearing design from the normal Cats. You can see the camshaft there installed. It's flat tappet. It's kind of weird because the camshaft does not have a cam bearing between every set of lobes. It's every other one. See, there should be a cam bearing right there on most engine designs, but it's on the second one. So you literally have about half as many cam bearings as you would on most engines. So this only runs 4 cam bearings, whereas most run about 7, or most would run 7 on it. A little bit of a weird design. Also, mushroom style lifters cannot be removed or installed without removing the camshaft. So here's a little data sheet on it. We have a bore of 4.1 and a stroke of 5.3, which makes it under square like most diesel engines. It's actually 7.01 liters. Why didn't they make it 7.1 if they call it the 7.1? 427 cubic inches. A lot of cool engines have that displacement. 16.5 to 1 compression ratio, pretty high. Just a little diesel engine. Okay, so those are the specifications and where items are on it and some of the design features of the 7.1 as far as just a basic engine design. But what about some good things about it? Well, according to most field mechanics that are more familiar with it than I am, because it is an equipment engine, I don't have the years of experiences on the truck engines, they say it's a fairly reliable, long-running engine. 10 to 12,000 hours generally in a machine is a long time, and those are usually about the hours it'll get before needing a replacement or a rebuild. Of course, these are very difficult to rebuild because they don't have liners. So just like the C7s, about 10 to 12,000 hours in a machine application, and hard to rebuild because they don't have liners either. Now, what are some of the good things about it? Well, in relation to the 6.6, which it took the place of, they updated a few things. One of those things is the front structure. You see, on the 6.6, there were no alignment areas on these front structure. You might be saying, well, what are you talking about? So typically on a CAT engine, you'll have alignment dowels that the front structure will slide over, allow it not to move. On the 6.6, for whatever reason, Perkins didn't decide to put those in there, so it made installing and aligning the front structure very tedious and very annoying as a mechanic because you're second guessing yourself. This is not something that should be subjective or adjustable, but it was. The 7.1, they added an alignment dowel and a hub that centers the front structure. Really glad they did that there. Also, the fuel pump timing from the 6.6 to the 7.1, they made it easier, a little simpler, and the fuel pump smaller. So that's good. It's really good, actually, because the timing of the fuel pump on the 6.6 was extremely complicated, and I don't know who designed it, but not the best design ever. One of the other things that they changed was they went to a retaining clip, I guess you call it, that's inside of the lifter, and they're hydraulic lifters now, and the push rods actually stay in the lifter and will not just pop out as easy. So I haven't seen that before. It's, I would say, an improvement. It makes it harder for the push rod to pull out of the lifter, which if you're messing with the overhead is very difficult. Now, the other thing they did was the bridges between the valves used to have very, very shallow engagement area, so it was very easy to pop the bridges off of the valves when you were, let's say, doing an overhead or messing with the injectors. And if you do that, you can drop a valve, which of course is horrible for the engine. And this one, they've slightly improved that by making the valve stem protrude slightly more so the bridges stay in contact. They also got rid of the stupid plastic clips that the 6.6 had that were supposed to hold the bridges on. They mostly just broke, and they got rid of that on this one. And as I already mentioned, they went to a hydraulic lifter system, so there's really no valve adjustments needed anymore. The engine itself is also fairly simple. There's not a lot of after treatment or extra emission sensors on the engine itself. There is an EGR system and EGR coolers, but most of the after treatment is done after the fact with the SCR catalyst and DPF. That's generally over the engine, and that is one good thing I like about the CATs. They've moved that mostly off the engine and put it in a separate unit, so it makes the engine itself a little easier to work on. It does have a compound turbo system, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm more of a fan of a single turbo. I don't see the need for two turbos, but engineers put it that way. It just is what it is. And probably the last nice thing I like about the engine is it's a common row engine, but as with most common row engines that have coil tubes that run through the cylinder head, making another point that can leak that's under high pressure, they don't have these. Perkins uses the injector and the fuel lines as the coil tube itself. The injector itself has a port that comes off the side that the fuel lines connect directly to. That gets rid of multiple components: the coil tube seal, also the coil tube retaining nut that most engines have. This engine does not have that, which Makes changing the injectors much easier. That's pretty much it as far as the things I like about it, the benefits of this engine. Now, you'll probably notice that the rest of this video, I'm going to be critiquing some of the design decisions that they made on this engine. And it's not to say it's a bad engine, but as a mechanic working on it, as an operator, these are things you probably would never notice. But as a mechanic, you would definitely notice. And here's what they are. Here's the damper. What's going on with these bolts holding the damper in here? That's kind of a weird, huh? Oh, what about the connecting rod bolts there? What's that? What's that over on the fuel pump there? You see that? You see that? One of the more popular videos I made several years ago was talking about my hatred of the Torx fastener and all its variations. And what is on this engine? Torx bits. Not a lot of Torx. Inverted Torx. They're everywhere. There's just a sprinkling of them. Random places. The connecting rod bolts, inverted Torx bits. The rocker arm shaft, inverted Torx bits. Some of the fuel pump bolts, inverted Torx bits. The damper bolts, inverted Torx bits. Why? What is going on with the inverted Torx bits? Did the engineer's family have stock in stupid fasteners or something? There is no place for inverted Torx bits. You have to buy special sockets. If it's a really tight place, maybe you need a wrench. Now you need an inverted Torx bit wrench. Stop it!
Stop it!
Stop using stupid fasteners. There's nothing wrong with a normal 6-pointed bolt. There's nothing wrong with them. Most of the bolts on this engine are normal bolts. You just put random ones in random locations to irritate people. Why are you doing this? Stop using inverted Torx. And also, there are random Torx bolts on this engine too. Why? The injector hold-down bolts are Torx. Stop using Torx. Use a hex, okay? An Allen wrench style. Heard of those before? Do they not have them wherever this thing's designed? They're stupid fasteners. No, use normal bolts. Why do you use inverted Torx? Biggest complaint with this. Well, not the biggest. Another weird feature of this engine. And I'm not going to rip this part apart too much. There's an oil pan spacer, which it goes between the block and the oil pan, and it's aluminum housing. It's good if you're just pulling the oil pan because it eliminates the joints between the front and rear structure that's normally there on most CAT engines, where you have to put a little silicone. It's possibly a point of leaking, but this doesn't have that. This has this weird spacer. I don't like the spacer though, for a couple reasons. One is Torx bolts are holding it up there. Thank you very much. But it actually bolts to the rear main seal, which the rear main seal is a separate housing behind the rear structure, kind of like a C13, if anyone knows what those look like, the rear mains, or the rear main seal. And so if you want to pull, let's say that not the oil pan, but the oil pan spacer is leaking, it has a gasket, you would have to remove the flywheel housing to get it off. No other way of doing that. And of course, the flywheel housing holds the rear motor mounts, and if there's a transmission or whatever's on the back of it, would have to be removed. Generally, you have to pull the engine out or remove the transmission to reseal it now. Not the best design. The 6.6 had a similar design. I'm not sure the reason of it really, but that is a design feature not a fan of. The next one here. The rocker arm shaft. I've pulled, it's got to be over 1,000 rocker arm assemblies or shafts off in my career. C7s, C13s, C15s, 3126, whatever. Lots of overheads and rocker arms. This is by far the most frustrating, most annoying, poorly designed rocker shaft I've ever seen in my life. Horrible design. The rocker shaft is one solid shaft. Then you have your 12 rocker arms. 6 intake, 6 exhaust. They're not interchangeable. That's fine. The problem is, one shaft. There are 4 million springs on this rocker shaft. So when you take the bolts out, which are inverted torques, by the way, pick it up, all of these shafts kind of spring together. Great, right? Almost impossible to reinstall unless you have these really expensive, poor quality, generally, hard to get spacers that hold the rocker arm assemblies apart. You should not need a special tool to install a rocker arm shaft. Also, you can't just put the shaft on and then put the rocker arms on after. That would be impossible. So you need to get all these spacers on and then put it in place. Even with the special tools, I did one the other day. It took me about 2 hours to finally get it installed properly so that nothing was binding up. I can't tell you how many times the bridges got out of place or fell out of place or the push rods got out of place. It is a nightmare to get this rocker arm shaft assembled and installed there. It does use hydraulic lifters, so you don't have to worry about an adjustment. But even with that, you have to take all of they're not adjusters, but the drive heads out of the rocker shafts to get it installed correctly. It is a horrible design. Horrible design. You should definitely redesign how the rocker arm shaft is assembled onto this engine. The next one, we'll stick with the valve train. The camshaft and the roller design, this is similar to the 6.6, is not really held in with anything. The camshaft is. The lifters, though, actually go up inside of the block. So if you were to try and change the camshaft in the field, it would almost be impossible because as you pull the camshaft out or in, the lifters will fall out because nothing holds them in except the camshaft. They can't go up or sideways. They literally have to fall out of the bottom of the block. But you have to be in the front of the block to pull the camshaft out. Do you see a problem with this? Not only that, they're flat tappet. Why not use rollers? Pretty much every CAT engine, C7, C9, 13, 15, they all have roller lifters. This is a flat tappet. It's kind of a older design using a flat tappet. Not a big fan, but I like roller lifters better than the flat tappet ones. My last critique of this engine is something that I can't even fathom why they did. And it's not even really a design feature. It's an afterthought. The injector, trim, file, numbers. First off, injector trim files, like on a 3460, or 4 digits, you just enter the digits in and you're set. That's it. These, for some reason, are not just numbers, they're also letters. But it's 30 digits long. 30 digits. Numbers and letters. There are more number combinations on an injector for a 7.1 than there are stars in the universe. Why? Do you plan on making 600 billion quadrillion injectors in the history of this engine? Because that's why you would need a 30-digit long injector trim file number. But you might be thinking, that's kind of a petty thing. Oh no. There's 2 sides to this trim file problem. Here's the other side. Here's how it's written out. So here's the 30-digit long injector trim file number. 73FB057 F907 2400 0016 2DF00FF30. But that's wrong. That's not how it goes. It actually goes like this. 73FB05F7 0016 2DF4 backup F907 2400 00FF, emphasis on the F, and then 30. Who in their right mind would write 30 digits in 2 lines, but split it down the middle without a line or a separation, and then expect you to know that it's in a Z pattern spread in half? Who thought of that? Who thought of that? Stupid, okay? Use your brain if you're designing engines. You obviously went to school and you obviously know how an engine works, so why would you do stupid stuff like this? those are my big critiques for this engine. Should you buy a machine that has this engine? Yeah, it's a good running engine. But like I said, it's when you have to work on it, kind of a pain because of some of the design choices. Okay? Anyway, that is enough of me discussing and critiquing the Cat 7.1. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.